Okay, so now it is time for another exciting video of the Putting It All Together series. And in this video, we are going to be dealing with CSS rules in particular. So let me just give you a quick summary. We're going to do the three different types of CSS rules, which are the tag rule, the ID rule, and the class rule. We are going to talk about the different types of style sheets, external versus embedded, or what we call internal, and then finally inline, the three hierarchies there. And we are going to talk about rules with multiple selectors. So that is going to be what is on our plate today. So let's first of all go over to the code. We're using our same website as before. And I'm going to go over to the styles.css because almost everything we're going to be doing today is in this file. So first of all, let's talk about how to see, or actually what are examples of the three types of rules and how to distinguish between them. So for the tag rule is very simple, simplest of the rules. It is just the same name that's in the tag. So actually, I am going to jump over here to index.html. And you see here on line 7, I have a body tag. Well, if I wanted to make a rule for body, I would just name it body without the brackets. So if you look over here, there, I have a rule for body. And all I have is the background is tan. Well, that makes sense if you look at the page because there's a tan background on the page. So that means all body elements in my website, unless they're overwritten, which I don't have any that are, but we'll talk about overriding styles here in a minute, will be tan, all of them. Okay, so some other examples of tag rules. Let's do a couple more before we move on. There's lots of them in here, but one I will do is the div. And we have mentioned the div before when we were talking about divs, but I just said to ignore the rule for right now. Well, now we can actually look at the rule. So we have the div rule, and there's several properties that are changed for the div. One is the text align center. Now, I only have one div on my site right now. As I mentioned, I'm mainly basing my site off tables. I like the tables personally, but a lot of people use divs. So let's go look over here real quick at the div. It was under the restoration page. It was this box right here. So notice the text is centered. Well, text align center, there's the first thing. Width 500 pixels, okay. So that looks about like 500 pixels, yep. Padding means how much before the, how much away from the edge does it need to be? And as you see here, I have 15 pixels. And then the paragraph that's in it may have a little bit of spacing too. So that's the 15 pixel padding. There's also a margin for how close things go up against it, and that's 10 pixels. Oops, didn't mean to do that, sorry. There's the 10 pixels right there for how close it is to things. And I have a border, 1.75 pixels is the weight of the border. And then I have it as a solid border and dark blue. And again, there you see it, just like that. Remember from a previous video, I commented out this rule. And what happened? Well, the text went back over to the left. It was no longer center aligned, and we didn't see the border going around the div. Okay, so that's another tag rule. So if I made any more divs, they would look the same. They would have the same layout as this div does. Another example, the figure. Figures go with images, and I don't want to get too far into them right now, but I do want to mention that This figure tag, I've set up a font size and a font alignment. Center and 12 pixels. Well, they're what are under my pictures in the Fig caption sections, which are nested inside the figure tab. So that is what we have here, these smaller text that are centered by the pictures on both the restoration page and the gallery page. That's what those are. So if you look here, though, I have the font size and text align center. But I also have a font setup, and I have a font family. This brings us to the multiple selector section. And this can be done with the other types of CSS rules, the ID rule and the class rule that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes as well, or in a combination of any of the rules. I have it as 2 tag rules, and I'm going to cover it right now. But that the rest will happen. Well, you'll see the other kind of rules in a minute. But it's right here. They're separated by a comma. P, comma, figure. So this means a paragraph tag or a figure tag. If any of those are the case, we have a font family, Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. And what this means by a font family is it tells the browser, if you have the Arial font, use it. Most browsers will have the Arial font, but maybe for some reason your browser doesn't. I don't have the Arial font. Then use Helvetica instead. Well, I don't have the Helvetica font either. Okay, then use the default sans serif font style, whatever type that is. Now, serifs are like what's up here in my H1. See how there's little lines on the edges of the letters? That's a serif font. A sans serif font is smooth. So as you see here, these don't have any of those lines. They are smooth. I'll zoom in there so you can see. This does, but that's not under the figure. The figure has that font family, the same as a paragraph, of the sans serif, which it's called a font family because those fonts are all similar. This is actually Arial, but Arial is a sans serif font. So it's the first one of choice. If we didn't have Arial, try Helvetica. If it didn't have Helvetica, then it goes to the default sans serif font. Okay, so that is the idea of this multiple selector. But let me throw a few more things out for you. You may say, well, wait a minute, we had the figure tag down here. Couldn't I just do this? Copy this, paste it in here, and remove figure from here. So now this is only for a paragraph, and this is for the figure. It keeps them separate. Yes, you could do that, and I'll show you. There should be no effect. These still look the same. If I go back to the main page with the paragraphs, they look the same. And the idea here is, okay, both have the same font family. Figure, in addition, though, has a default size, and it's aligned to the center. The reason why what I had before is better, like that, is that this is, in a sense, the saying, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's taking care of 2 lines of code in 1. So whenever possible, we like to pair these together if there's common rules across several tags. It also becomes easier if, what if we decide we don't like that font family, but we want the paragraph and figure text to match, and we change the font family? Well, we would have had to change it in 2 places before. Now we only have to change it in 1 because of this multiple selector rule. So multiple selector rules can be very useful, and they save on code, and they also save on when you're going to change something, the amount you have to change. Okay, now I would not want to put these up here, though, because the paragraph, I don't want it to be font size 12, and I don't want it to have the text align to center. Okay, so now for the next part, let's talk about the class rule. Actually, I'll talk about the ID rule first. So the ID rule, I don't have a lot of those, and I'll tell you why. The ID rule is only supposed to be used for one tag, but it can be used for more, but that's not how it was intended to be. An ID is supposed to be unique. So main picture, number sign in front of it. That tells us this is an ID rule. And all I'm doing is setting the width and the height. But see, I only have one main picture, and it's on index.html. It's this one here with the light, with that special link on it that I showed you in the first video. It's called an image map. None of my other pictures are that big. If you see, I cut them way down to smaller sizes. And if you look in the CSS rules, I have a class rule somewhere. Where is it? Gallery pick for gallery picture. And see, I have a few other properties on it, but I have a width of 350. And on this ID picture, I have a width of 500. So, and I also have a height. So what I can do is I can go over to the index page and I can find that picture, which is right here, images src images /3g3e intro pic.jpg. And then the next attribute is an ID. ID equals main picture. Notice there is no number sign in front of it. It's just the ID is main picture. But on the rule page, that means that it is this rule, this ID. And I want to check something here. Yes, see, I also have it as a gallery picture in a class, which I don't think I needed there. I'm going to take that out. And then I have a map attribute, use map. And we'll talk about those when we get to image maps. But I'm going to take this out. You can do multiple ones like this, but it's a little confusing to have it in here. I'm going to take it out. Hopefully I'm not forgetting something about what it does, but I don't think so. Yeah, it's fine. And I still have my image map. Everything's fine. Yep, still works great. Okay, so I'll just make sure that that really refreshed here. Yep. Okay, so that is your ID rule. You have the ID in the tag, and then you come over here to your styles, and you should find it with the number sign, and that's it. Okay, so let's now look at the class rule. Now, the class rule is something that can happen many times. And instead of just having a tag name or a number sign for an ID, the class rule uses a dot. So I have a bunch of class ones in here. A lot of them have to do the navigation bar, so I'm not going to deal with them this week. But this one's kind of neat here, dot quote. So that is our class rule for quote. I applied that, if you remember, to the paragraph tag, the second paragraph in the index page. If you look over here, see, class is quote for the paragraph. So it'll still do anything else a paragraph would do, but it's going to also pick up any attributes or properties that the quote class has. And what does the quote class do? Well, if you look back here, it just does a font style to italic. And look, that's what happened. Okay, so those are the different types of rules. Now, as I told you, in a multiple selector rule, I happen to have 2 tag rules, but I could have paragraph, comma, dot whatever. I don't have anything else that would really be appropriate there for a font type, but I could have whatever I wanted, or if I had a particular ID'd element, I could put the number sign for that. They can mix and match. It doesn't matter. Okay, so at this point now, we want to start talking about the different types of style sheets or style blocks of code. Most of my styles are in this document, in this external style sheet, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you look over in my contact page, after my JavaScript code, which we'll deal with towards the end of the course, I have a style section. That's the last thing I have in the head. And this style section has several different things. One thing, mainly what it has is stuff for that icon section where the light comes in. I made some extra rules for just this. And one of the rules I made was for a special H1. Now, if I took out special H1, watch what will happen if I just make it H1. So I'm going to take this back and I'm going to say H1. And then down here, I will take out the class because this class doesn't exist anymore. I'll just do H1 like that. So now what I am doing is I'm saying this is my H1 rule. But remember, I had the H1 rule in the styles page. What did it do? It made it blue with white. So I'm going to refresh this and look now what happens. I have a black top, but if I go back to my other pages, they're still blue. So what happened here? Well, what happened is what I really wanted to illustrate, that there's a hierarchy with these style sheets and also a usability aspect, two aspects. So when you talk about usability, the external style sheet works for all pages. It's very usable, except if the page itself has an internal style sheet, then anything that conflicts with the external is overwritten by the internal. These other ones don't really affect much, but well, actually the image does. The IMG tag. But anyway, this is a better example because we're not dealing with that moving thing. So this here is a great example of how now this rule has overwritten that rule. The reason why I had it and I didn't have it that way, I had this with this H1 special was so that it would not overwrite, because my top H1, I wanted to stay the standard for my site, but the new one I wanted to change. There's also something called an inline style. The inline style, well, oh, by the way, before I go there, this is called an embedded style sheet or an internal style sheet. This one is the external. So I want to make sure you got those terms down. So now for the inline, which is the final one, I'm going to go over to my index page. And I have paragraphs here, and I'm going to do something on this first paragraph. I'm going to put paragraph P space style equals quotes color colon green semicolon. I'm going to save this and I'm going to come over now to my home page See, now my top paragraph is green, but my others are not. This overwrote the external style sheet. But here's something kind of neat. So if I did this inside my head, I put style, and I had a style section. Okay, so I've got this style section inside my head, and I just have a simple rule for paragraph. And what do I do? Well, what if I put color colon green? What if I do something like that? Oh, not green. I didn't mean to do green. Red. Now do you see that these paragraphs became red, but this one's still green? So what happened was the hierarchy is very important. Although the styles.css, the external style sheet, is the most versatile, the best to use, the internal embedded style has a higher priority. It overwrites this external style sheet. And I showed you that with the H1 a minute ago anyway. But then if you have an inline style like I do down here, that's even more powerful than the internal style sheet, and it overrides that. So the internal style sheet, or the inline style is the least versatile because it only applies to the element you put it on. But it's the strongest because it overrules anything that conflicts with it from the external or internal. The internal, again, is the second strongest because it overwrites what's in the external, but not any inline. And the external is the least powerful, but it applies to everything unless it's overwritten. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to show you one more time. By default, these should have been black text, but I set the page itself to have green, to red, and then I set the one internal to have green. Now, one thing I did not do is I could have over here, just to show you, I didn't have a color rule for paragraph, but now I do. So if I show you here, you see I do not have the blue. It also worked for Fig captions though, and you can see they all turn blue on both pages here. Oh, and here's another paragraph. I forgot there's a paragraph inside the div. So there, we do have an example. See, it's blue. And any other paragraphs on our page would be blue. But the home page, nope, they're all red except for the one that's inline, and that's green. So let me set these back because we don't want to leave it like this. So I'm going to take this out of the CSS page, save the CSS page, come back to index. I'm going to remove my inline styles because I don't need it. I'll just still leave the inline styles, of course, on the contact page because that one's good. And then I'll save that. Oh, I've got to take out the inline right here. Save it again. And now I'm going to refresh it. Everything's back to normal, and you can look over here, and I no longer have the blue Fig captions or paragraph, and the gallery should be fine as well. Okay, so to sum it up, what have we done? We've explained the differences between external, embedded or internal, and inline styles. We've talked about the ID rule, the tag rule, and the class rule. We've also covered multiple selector rules. If you need to, watch this video again or watch other example videos that I have posted. With this CSS, I hope you can see how much you can build on your own site and how important it's going to be in your project. Just think if I had to do inline styles or use attributes of tags to format all of this on every single one of these pages. I mean, I have all this, all this stuff. What if I had to replicate it for all the elements on each of these pages? Well, you know what? That was how it used to be. I remember that when I first started web development, I was in college and I made several websites for people. I was hired. Actually, I was hired by the college I was at, Cal State Fresno, by several grants to make their websites for them as a student. And we didn't have CSS then. CSS came shortly after that. So we didn't have CSS, and everything was coded with styling as you went. And so if you had, for example, if you come back over here, my tables. See, I have tables here, or a table. I have a table here, and I have a table here. Instead of just doing something to the styles and changing the table, say they wanted a color change, I'd have to go to each of the pages. Now I could do a find replace, but that's my best I could do, is a find replace on each of the pages. So it really has opened the door to website development to be so much easier and so much more time efficient, to have these in a sense standard pages or standardizing pages that your site goes by to so that everything's perfect. And I remember too the days when you'd format all this stuff, and we'd have navigation bars look just like this, but they'd be using pictures instead of styling. And back then we had not as good of internet connections and not as fast, and yet we're loading pictures for menu bars instead of just colors, which is so much less space. But anyway, we would do all that, but you'd cycle through and it wouldn't be seamless like this. You'd get little jumps and things would move around a tiny bit. And you'd figure out, why did it move down a tiny bit? And a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it has been eliminated by these style sheets, so that you're not having to format individual buttons and holders for buttons and all that, to where you could mess up just a tiny bit and have it off just a little bit between pages. I hope you found this video useful, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, and I hope you got some more ideas of how you can do your project, your final project in the class.